Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm really excited because for the first time in the studio, we have Kimberly Kaplan, and she and I were just sitting here talking about the road that we have been on, which feels like very parallel. And when our son was diagnosed with autism, one of the first things that we did was we called family members, and we called my brother-in-law, and he said, "Oh, I've got friends that you've got to meet," and it was your family. And then I think you were saying that the first time that we actually met was at his wedding.
It was either there or it was at the, I think they had a pre-wedding get-together barbecue or something, because they were living out here at the time.
Yes.
But if it wasn't there, then it was up in Santa Barbara at the wedding.
Think it was up. I think it might have been up at Santa Barbara. And yet, so I would see you at things, met you and your husband and your child, but you know, it wasn't like we went, because, and as we were just talking about it, you said something really profound. Do you want to say what you said?
Can you remind me?
You said I was really busy. Well, I was busy.
And you said it back to me.
Yes,
we were
I went,
dealing with our child.
Yes.
We were focused on our child.
Yes.
And for 2 or 3 years, that's what we did.
And that really was the thing. You know, I wasn't out there at that point looking to connect with other families because we had found what we were going to do, and we were all hands on deck, you know, in the trenches. And in those early years, that's all you can do.
At the height, we had 24 hours of services.
Yeah.
My husband had the full-time job, and I took care of the services.
There you go.
And that's, you know, those years were rough, and we didn't want to branch out yet.
And we were busy too. But then I went to an event, and I think you were much ahead of me in terms of volunteering.
Autism Speaks.
You'd gotten very involved. And so I would run into you at things, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's that woman that's friends with my brother-in-law." And so we would connect at those events, and then just more and more of those events. And you got very involved with volunteering. You got very involved with Autism Speaks. So those were the two ways that I knew you. That I knew you from my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and because you volunteered at Autism Speaks. I didn't know all the other things. I'm still finding out all the other things that you do, and that's sort of, I think that's sort of a tale that we all need to be aware of as autism parents, is that we should ask each other questions more often.
When I first got out and first started volunteering, that was my main reason, was to get out there and say, all right, there's got to be other people like us, right? And I had learned as much from books as I could learn. I was still learning from facilitators, and we were taking our parent classes. But parents need support.
Yes.
And this was 2005, 2006, and I don't know how much was around back then, but I just wanted to get myself out. I got out before my husband did. And came out and volunteered and just got myself out there.
Pretty typical. That the moms find their niche first.
I had more time.
Well, and a lot of times we're the project manager, so we have more points of contact than the dads. Not always. I don't want to say, because there's sometimes dad is the project manager and he's doing things, and mom is reticent, you know. But more often than not, it's the moms that get there first. But the dads follow at their own pace.
Yeah, of course.
And I want moms that are watching that are early on to know that you know we didn't give up on them, and they get there, right?
Absolutely. I just told you about a connection that I have with newly diagnosed children, and that's one of the first things I say is it's going to seem rough right now. You're not going to understand a lot of it. You're not going to be able to know how to talk about it. But it gets better. It gets easier. It does. And then I go on and help them as much as I can in those early stages.
So, Kimberly, let's talk a little bit about you before autism. Okay. What was your thing? What were you doing? And then, you know, how did that change when autism came to live at your house?
Right. Well, in the 1990s, I was in the business. I was a screenwriter. I was working for a payroll company. I was trying to get in the door in that way. I met my husband in 2000. We weren't young, so if we wanted to have a child, we had to get going.
Yes.
And then I was pregnant in 2003, 2002, 2003. So we had Jason in 2003. And for the first year, we just thought we had a quiet baby. I remember one story where, you know, you hand your baby off to a babysitter, and my mom was one of the babysitters, and you always want to come back with good reports. And I'm in childcare now. I work for the YMCA, so I always want to, you know, oh, they were great and stuff. And when they're not, you got to be careful about how you tell the parent. Well, I'd come back and my mom would say, your son is so good. I've sat for my other grandchildren and they've cried and stuff like that. And he sat there for an hour just spinning things. And we didn't know what that meant.
Right.
We were
like,
just
oh,
we were just happy,
behaved.
that he was good for my mom. And we'd go home and, oh, he was good for mom, yay.
Yeah.
And we were proud as can be.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
That's no reason
We have a
to
quiet
alarm bells.
baby.
Yay,
Yeah.
yay.
Yeah.
Well behaved,
Yeah.
isn't he? He's contemplative.
Yeah.
Right.
We didn't know anything at that point in time.
And were you still writing when he was an infant? It probably put a dent in it, right?
It put a dent. I was the full-time caretaker, so I was trying to enjoy my child.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a plan. I was going to go back to work because I had a full-time job and I wanted to be, viable and things, and we could put our son in daycare and things like that. But it was at his first birthday. And on the Kaplan side of the family, this was the first baby they had in a long time. Oh. So people were excited, and we had a big party, and we had friends over. And one of the friends, her husband, was watching our son. And he was sitting on the floor, and he was staring at a ceiling fan. He's just going like this. And again, we think he's just behaving, and he's not crying, and everything's great. And this friend made a comment to my husband. He said, if my wife were to see your son right now, she might say that he has autism. Ooh. And we're like, what's that word? Now, I had talked to the wife at softball games before. That's how my husband knew this friend. And she had talked about autism, but I didn't really know what she was saying, that she was an autism certified facilitator therapist. And she worked with kids on the spectrum, and she would try to tell me about this, but I, didn't.
And do you think now she was trying to
no,
grease
not,
the way? She just was being conversational.
She was maybe a little bit towards the end, because my husband took that comment, and by the end of the party, he was Googling autism, and he freaked himself out.
Right.
And then an hour or two later, he told me and freaked me out.
Right.
So needless to say, we didn't sleep that night because we had all these things on the internet that said, your son will never hug you. Your son won't do this. Your son won't do that. And we're like, what What
will he do?
Right, and we don't know anything. So the next day we called the woman, the wife, and she got back to us a couple hours later, and she said, okay, first of all, get off the internet. You're scaring yourself needlessly.
Right.
But then she did say, and our families had gotten together at softball games and occasional family outings and things like that. And she did say, I've been meaning to talk to you. Because of what she could, and she could evaluate. So she was a certified person who could really pull aside someone and say, there's a couple of things here that scare me.
Right.
And then my husband at the same time, so we heard this and we talked to her and she calmed us down. And then my husband talked to his best friend who happened to be a pediatrician. And we brought Jason down to him. He works in Torrance, so he couldn't be our pediatrician. We were in Van Nuys at the time. And we brought him down and he looked at him and he said, you should get him evaluated because it couldn't hurt, and there's some things I don't like, the eye contact and things like that. And we went back to our lives, but this doctor, bless his heart, would not let us go. And that's one thing that I preach today to new parents is don't put it off.
Right.
It's an evaluation. It's 3 hours of your life. They play with your kid, they'll sit and talk to you for an hour or so, they'll tell you what they see, but don't put it off. Because he probably called my husband every day. And he gave us Lanterman Regional's number, he gave us UCLA's number, he gave us all the information we needed, we just needed to make that phone call.
Wow.
And it took us a couple weeks.
It takes a while.
Which wasn't a couple of months or a year or so, which some people have put off.
Oh, yes.
So I thank him, and my husband knows we can't ever stop thanking Andy.
Sure.
But we got called the regional center, and they got an evaluation for Jason, and he was 15 months old.
Wow.
And we walked in.
Back then, that was. Even now, that's early.
Yeah. We walked into the regional center, and one of the people walking by, I don't think she was even our person who was going to evaluate Jason. She said, "We don't get babies."
Yeah.
And now it's different. I think they can see things.
They
a little
can do it
earlier.
at 15 months. It's
Yeah.
still hard
Yeah.
because that means that the parent has to be out of denial
That's right.
and
That's right.
have found the right people who
Yes.
can do that. And
Yes.
that's a pretty intense.
Yes.
So 15 months,
15
amazing.
months.
Okay.
So we had, and it was a provisional diagnosis.
Okay.
Because they can't, at least back then, the way
Right.
I understood it, they couldn't give an official diagnosis until 3 years.
Right.
So we had, but what it did was it gave us the full boat of services.
That's amazing.
And we could hit the ground running. And
That's
that's
amazing.
why probably 6 months later, I was up to 24 hours of
Wow.
floor time. I don't think we had OT yet, but we had speech and floor time.
And now, because I was just talking about floor time earlier today, so it's good that you're here to talk about this, because I was not a fan of floor time. And I always say that I know people who were and that are, and that but now, did you just do floor time, or did you do ABA later on?
We did the early intervention. Again, we had such a young kid.
Yeah.
That I think they were just willing to give us the early intervention floor time, and then he graduated to it was at the time called discrete trial training,
Right.
which was it's a part of ABA.
Yes.
And then we had to go do our classes, and then we
Yes.
had to have a different facilitator. But for that first year, until he got his permanent diagnosis at age 3, I think we just had floor time.
Okay. And for you, because I was saying, please don't take my experience. For you, floor time worked and it was great and you enjoyed the experience.
Well, here's what it was. We liked the facilitator. My son got along with her. She would bring this big giant bag of toys, and after a couple of weeks, my son would be like, "Oh, toys,"
Right.
She explained things well to us. She took her time to explain things. She definitely made sure that we followed through and made us understand that we had to follow through with things, or this whole thing kind of falls apart. I think that's really what it was. Is that at that time, we liked the services, we liked the person. She was always on time, you know.
Yes. I mean, those things count.
They weren't calling you and saying, "Oh, my car broke down again today."
Right, right.
We had those therapists.
Of course, everybody has had those therapists.
That's why I think it just worked for us at the time. And then when it was age appropriate, we cranked it up.
Okay. And so, but in all of this, when you're dealing with all these different services, your life had to have changed considerably.
Yeah, and again, we were very lucky. The plan was for me to go back to work, but this was around the time I was going to do that anyway. So my husband has the full-time job and I don't, and it's pretty easy to figure out what we should do. He stays with the job and I do everything.
Yeah.
The only little notch in that, and I've written about this in my blog, is that you have to be able to communicate with your spouse about what needs to be done with your child, because they're not there listening to the facilitator.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
Right? You'd think that it would be a dub, but in the middle of the hubbub, that's the thing that suffers.
And then you're still
everything
learning
degrades.
how to explain things.
Yeah.
So by the time nighttime comes and your husband's home, you're trying to say, "Well, I think she said to do this and this," and
It's
you're
hard.
fumbling around and you're not quite sure yet. My husband, it wasn't a lucky thing, but he did have to have a month and a half off from work because he had major surgery.
Okay.
But a blessing in disguise, it gave him a chance to go to the speech therapy. It gave him a chance to be in on the therapies and really kind of catch up on getting that one-to-one with the facilitator.
Wow.
And that was awesome because it took me out of the equation. Because
Right.
I probably wasn't even, explaining things properly. I was just
Well, we do
doing
the
my
best we
best.
can. Yeah. We do the best that we
Yeah.
can. So
So I was the autism mom. Husband was at work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is an equation that we're very familiar with.
Yeah,
That a lot of
absolutely.
people go through that.
Yeah.
At what point was there a shift for you when you went, okay, now I want to give back. I want to do volunteering. How old was your son, and what was happening that made you go, it's now. Now's the time when I do that.
I think I had absorbed enough information from books and from the facilitator. I think I was locked in the house for several years.
Yeah.
I think Jason was around 6, 5 to 6. And I think I was just curious about what was out there for support, but also to give back.
Lovely.
I don't know if it's been implied, but we were very lucky.
Yeah.
We knew a pediatrician who pushed us. We knew an autism facilitator who, I went into my child's first IEP knowing more than what most people do at the end of their IEP journey.
There you go.
Because I had her on the phone for hours.
There you go.
She was teaching me, look out for this, look out for that, look out for, write this down, write this down. And I was so organized, and I went in there just fully.
What a gift.
And I just wanted to, give back because
And
it was
you
just
do that now.
it was insane how lucky we were.
Well, you have massively given back. I see you working all the time and doing all kinds of things. But then at what point did you sort of take back more parts of your life and decide I want to start writing again?
Well, I had been a writer. I was a screenwriter in the 90s, and I did a little bit of fiction writing, novels, and I definitely put it down during that pregnancy years. I did some, but when that first year hit of autism, probably the second year, and then I began to think, if I wanted to get back into writing, what can I write about?
Right.
And I wrote about Jason. Because again, it seemed like we had a lot of luck, but we also made a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get them out there and say, don't make these mistakes because we were idiots and we did this, and this. So maybe try to avoid that.
Sure.
So that's how I got back into writing.
So what did you get back to first? Did you get back to screenwriting first, or did you get back to the blog or the books?
That book, I'll show it right there. Yes, this was just our journey, just what we went through, from the stories that I've already told you to his first speech therapy story, which I can get into if you want. This is significant because this is the Titanic, and this is an obsession that my son was going through at the time. He would draw this probably 50 times a day. He gave him a piece of paper. And you drew this, then you did this, then you did that. He had it. Right. You understand.
It was a set thing that he would do.
Take this color out, take that color out, turn the paper over, start again.
There you
50
go.
times a day.
Wow.
And we bought him books on the Titanic because he would absorb the information. We didn't shy away from the obsessions, except for maybe, okay, you've gone through enough pieces of paper now, so you can stop.
Right.
But I had him do this cover for me because this was around the time that he was drawing this all the time. And this was his book. This book was about him.
Yeah. And we should say, because I don't think they can read it on the camera,
Yeah.
the title of it is A Parent's Guide to Early Autism Intervention by Kimberly Kaplan.
Yeah.
Okay. And so detailing things that you did. And
this was just our journey. This was
Yeah.
just, again, the discovery at the first birthday party to the floor time, to the speech story, to just, and then I don't quite know where it goes up to, but just my idea was, hey, I'm writing again, and here's something that I'm really, really passionate about.
And where can people get that?
This is available hard copy on Amazon.
Okay.
If you want to do it digitally, it's Amazon or Smashwords.
Okay. Great.
So they can get it both ways.
Fabulous.
But yeah, and then after that, I think I just picked up and got right back into writing. Went back into screenplays, went back into fictions, novels, and.
So when did you decide to do a blog?
The blog came about from the person I told you, my long-term, my go-to person, my lifeline person.
Right.
She got out of wanting to be a therapist, and she started modernmom.com.
Okay.
And she contacted me one day, and she said, it'd be great to have an autism mom to blog for me. And so this was 5 years ago, and I've been blogging weekly for her since.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
That discipline of doing that.
Yeah.
It's more than most of us can do.
Yeah. Sometimes the topics I have to think about a little bit. Okay, what happened to Jason this week? Can I write about that? And sometimes I'll pull from old stuff, and I'll just say, remember, with your first IEP, try to get this and this and this and this done.
But helpful stuff.
Yeah,
stuff that would be
always,
helpful and inspirational. Always. Now, so he's the same age as my son.
15?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so is he at a point now, does he have an opinion about you writing about him?
He has a lot of opinions. No, he knows,
okay.
He knows I'm here today.
Right.
I told him what it's about.
Right.
He knows I go to conferences still. He knows that I blog weekly. He knows about the books. The only thing he has talked about in the last couple of years is when because he's 15 now. So if you're around other moms and things like that, he wants a heads up if I'm going to talk about autism.
There you go.
And in the same vein, I've asked him if he wants to talk about it.
Right.
If he wants to bring it up. And he always tells me, well, I will if I feel like it.
I like that.
He plays it totally cool like that.
Like, why is it essential? I like that. And
I
I think that's a great way to be,
Yeah.
Amazing. So if he's there, he wants a heads up if you're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Which sometimes he gets, and sometimes it just
Right.
kind of comes out.
Listen, I have had to take my son in the other room and go, I didn't bring it up. Somebody else brought it up. Do I have permission to talk about it or not? And he'd be like, yeah, Mom, it's fine. And I'll go, okay, I just didn't want to, step on your toes. And he's like, just be discreet, Mom. Just be discreet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, fine. So when did the second book come?
Well, the second book is about 4 years ago. I think I've been blogging for them longer than I think. But I had a certain number of blogs accumulated.
Right.
And so I could put them out as helpful tools.
And it's 2 years of autism blogs.
Yes. So now it's probably double the number of blogs that I've put out.
Yeah.
Maybe more than that. But I was very excited to ask a daughter of Pam Eisenberg, Megan Eisenberg, who is a fantastic artist. And I asked her if she would draw me a cover and I would pay her. So I commissioned her. I was the first one to commission her for a cover. And so this was just putting all my blogs, organizing them and putting them in a book to just be helpful again.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And these are, you got to charge like 99 cents minimum, I think.
Uh-huh.
So that's, because I'm not looking to make money off of them.
Okay,
I just
just
want them
want
out
to put
there.
the information out there.